Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Club, the Salt Lake Tribune's new podcast about the NHL in Salt Lake City. My name's Belle Fraser. I'm the Utah Hockey Club beat reporter for the Tribune, and I'm also the host of this podcast. I'm really excited about this project, to be able to bring you guys a fun new way to get your Utah Hockey Club news, and also maybe some interviews with people that you wouldn't hear from in our stories, like different beat reporters from different teams, so you can learn about the different identities around the NHL and the opponents Utah will face for the rest of the season, as well as people from the organization and different hockey minds. Today, we are very grateful to General Manager Bill Armstrong for joining us for our first episode. He gives a really great interview about where Utah Hockey Club is at the midway mark of the season, where the team wants to go, thoughts on the trade deadline, his developing prospects, the veterans in the room this year, and also a bit about his own journey of how he landed in an NHL front office after his playing years. So a really great listen, and thank you again to him for coming on. And we'll also close out the podcast with a bit of Q&A. We'll do this every week. So on Twitter, I'll, ask for a mailbag of questions that you guys are curious about. Feel free to comment there. My DMs are open for topics that you want to be covered on Inside the Club. And you can also find me. My email at the Tribune is bfraser@sltrib.com. So truly, this podcast is for you. It's what you want to hear. So let me know, and I'll try my best to cover everything. We'll have weekly episodes every Monday with different guests, different topics, different analysis. So this is the first of many, and we're excited to have you along on this journey. So without further ado, let's push it over to our interview with Bill Armstrong. All right, so hello, everyone. I am joined by Utah Hockey Club General Manager Bill Armstrong. Bill, thank you so much for being the very first guest of Inside the Club podcast presented by the Salt Lake Tribune. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very honored that I am the first guest on the show, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, no better voice than to catch, fans and new followers up with where this team is and where they're going. So appreciate you taking the time. But, everyone knows you as a general manager now, kind of one of the faces of this team, but you weren't always, front office. So I wanted to know, just how did you originally get into hockey? As a kid, you obviously played and coached
Yeah.
as well. So where did, your origin story kind of start?
Well, I had a love. I grew up in Canada, just outside of Toronto, and I had a love for hockey. That was my everything in life. It was my education, my religion, everything was through hockey. And so I got big enough for some reason. I kept growing to 6'5", and I was able to kind of hook my way onto some teams and move up, and eventually play major junior, where I found myself with the Oshawa Generals. And we went on to win the World Cup, and I got drafted to the NHL, and my story began. And I played 8 years of pro hockey, mostly in the American League. And at the end of that, I got an opportunity to coach with a famous NHL coach at the time, was Peter Laviolette. And we ended up winning a Calder Cup, and I ended up getting into coaching for a while. And that was kind of like my backbone and my background of how I kind of, ended up into the scouting, which I just truly loved. And that was kind of led me to managing. And then from managing, obviously I got into being the general manager. So I've learned to kind of do everything from being a captain to being assistant coach to being the head coach, and all the way through from being a part-time amateur scout to a full-time amateur scout to a crossover to running a staff. I kind of made my way all the way through, and I think that helps me today when I go to do my job as general manager, because I've pretty much done everything in hockey. And even one summer I went in to sell tickets for a minor league team to learn that avenue of it. So I've kind of learned everything I needed to, and then the job came up, and it was for the Florida Panthers at the time. And I sat in the interview, and I thought to myself, like, wow, I didn't realize I had all these things that made me a great candidate for the job. And so I took that and ended up eventually getting the job with the Arizona Coyotes. That started my I guess probably the reason I'm here today, and led me to this unbelievable job in Utah, and with the great team. So I'm very privileged to have this, and blessed, and that's kind of my run of how I got here.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to go back to when you first started coaching, close out your AHL career with the Providence Bruins as a player, and then
Yeah.
immediately go on to the coaching staff. So what was that transition like? Were there players you played with, which now you were kind of,
Yeah.
in charge of in a way? Just what was that transition like in terms of mentality and your role on the
I
team?
think it was probably harder on me because I was young. I was like 31 at the time, and I was their
Mhm.
captain. So they had a huge amount of respect for me because I was a fighter too, and I had to play that role for the team, and they knew how seriously I took it and how hard I prepared as a player. So I think when I transitioned to coaching, they had a lot of respect for me, and they probably live with me a little bit as I learned to do that job. And coaching is a hard thing, and I was a really young coach, an emotional coach at the time. So I think I left a few scars, but they were all good because I was, the main goal was to develop players and win. But I learned a tremendous amount about hockey on different sides from being a coach. Coaching amplifies your life. It's like living 10 years in one. It's a tremendous learning process, and I love that. But at some point in time, I left coaching and got into scouting, which was a great foundation for me to do the job that I do now.
With scouting, was that always something you kind of knew you wanted to do, or while you were coaching, you were picking up on specific things with players? Just what's the next transition like
Yeah.
in that
I
phase?
was always scouting in my brain. I think I
Mhm.
had a chance to play junior hockey with Eric Lindros, and I can remember evaluating him as a kid. Like I could understand certain parts of his game, his skating, and how he had his hockey sense. So I think I always had that. That was a natural thing for me to be evaluating hockey players. I watched a lot of hockey growing up. I was always at the rink 24/7, or I was watching Hockey Night in Canada with my family. But I constantly watched hockey, and I think that's really helped me. As I've made my way through it, is that evaluation process. But I always had it as a young kid. Even when I was playing junior, I can remember critiquing people of what they did, and so I've always had that in my blood somehow, and I still do that to this day. So it's been a good habit to have.
Mentioned Hockey Night in Canada. Did you have a favorite team growing up
Oh
over there?
yeah, unfortunately, I was a Leafs.
Okay,
I was a Leafs junkie when I grew up, and I had the a chance to play in Maple Leaf Gardens for 2 years when I was a young
cool.
kid. So that was a pretty special thing. And growing up in that building it was pretty special. So I went back to it last year. I went to scout one of our players, Artem Duda. He was playing in there, and they'd redone it. It was kind of disappointing, to be honest with you, because I expected to go back and see Maple Leaf Gardens, and it's not the same. So
Right. That's still cool though. And
mm,
then just to get into your amateur scouting, you obviously grew a lot within the St. Louis organization,
yeah,
director of amateur scouting to assistant general manager and, a big architect of that 2019 Stanley Cup championship team.
yeah.
Just what did you learn through that process of what it takes to build, a winning team in the NHL that you're able to carry with you as Utah, in the long run looks to do the same?
Yeah, find a lot of smart hockey people. That was what I learned in St. Louis. I worked around incredibly talented hockey people, and I tried to suck all the information and all the knowledge out of them. And it started with obviously Larry Plow hired me, three-time Stanley Cup winner. I got to work with Jarmo Kekalainen, Doug Armstrong, Dave Taylor, and Al McGinnis's of the world, and Marty Brodeur. And Larry Robinson, like he got 10 Stanley Cups. So I was very fortunate to work around great people and being able to kind of take in a lot of their knowledge and grow. That's my big thing is trying to learn every single day and grow and become smarter all the time at hockey and work at it every single day. And when I was around those guys, I really did. And there's a lot of patience you have to build a Stanley Cup team. And I think because we weren't in Canada, I think that our fan base in St. Louis accepted the fact that we were just trying to get better every year. And as long as we did that, then they could see us grow. They were happy with that. The fans were incredible. They were really patient because every playoffs we were playing like Stanley Cup champions, whether it be LA Kings or Chicago Blackhawks in the first round, and they were going on to win championships, which made us better in the long run. And it made
Mhm.
us become all better at our craft because we had to go out and beat those teams to go win a championship, which we did. And it was a tremendous experience to work in that staff and kind of that's where I kind of grew up as a person and learned a lot of my hockey knowledge.
Did you get your day with the cup that summer?
Yeah, interesting story. So I saw my phone ring about 3 o'clock the day before I was supposed to get it. We're having a big party at the house, and the NHL called today. You're not getting the cup. We can't find it. It's somewhere in Russia. And I said, well, you better find it. There's two parties I got to take it to tomorrow, and I don't care if you got to give me the fake one out of the Hall of Fame. I'm gonna have my day with the cup. So it showed up around 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
No.
which was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just
The
to
real
have it
one
from
did?
what's that?
The real one did,
The
or
real one did. It finally
okay.
showed up about 3 o'clock, and it was just an unbelievable day with it. But the NHL was so upset about the fact that I didn't have it for my full day that they said, "Hey, listen, on this day in the fall, you can have it again. There's a spare day," which was great because I was able to go to the schools and the hospitals from my
Mhm.
hometown, and do a lot of charity stuff with it. And at the same time, we went and had breakfast in Richmond Hill at Three Coins and took it to the rink I grew up playing with.
Mhm.
It was just an incredible day. So I
Yeah.
really got it 2 days basically. So I was kind of spoiled in that fact.
Yeah, it kind of worked out for the better, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
And then after, seeing your work and your team's work come to fruition there, was there a point where you really felt confident that, okay, I'm ready to do this on my own in a way?
Yes, yeah. I think I was so into the St. Louis Blues and trying to win another championship and do my job better. The one thing I've always tried to, I was like, and saying, you'll hear me say this all the time, success in the NHL is rented and rent's due every day in the
Mhm.
NHL. So if you want to stay on top of your game, and I was so obsessed about, trying to win another championship with St. Louis, it didn't really come on my radar till I finally got a phone call about it. And then it did. And once I got in motion of trying to become a general manager and interviewing for jobs, I don't want to say the word, I was gone a little bit because my mind had moved on to, hey, listen, I generally have the background of what it takes to be a general manager, and I think I can get a job in the National Hockey League as a general
Mhm.
manager. So once it got to that point, my brain kind of changed, and I moved forward, and was able to work with the Arizona Coyotes that gave me a chance. So it was a blessing.
And you get to Arizona and, you undertake a really big rebuild. You stripped it all the way down. Just what are the challenges with that, it being your first full stint as a general manager and
Yeah.
taking that risk to reinvent this team?
I had it was a hard job, put it that way. I had no idea of exactly what I was getting into. I was so excited about becoming a GM. And I remember saying to my boss at the time was Doug Armstrong, who's a really good
Mhm.
hockey man. I'm like, I'm going to take the job. He's like, I don't think you should take that job. Yeah, I don't think you should take that one. You have no idea. And I didn't, but I was so gung ho, and I had a thought process, and I understood where we were and what we wanted to get accomplished. And my obsession was to go in and hire the best people, create the best hockey ops, and be a championship organization off the ice, which will lead us to being a championship organization on the ice. So that was my obsession, and I had a pretty good reputation at the time, and I still do in the I guess in hockey. So people were attracted to me. They were not crazy about the setup there.
Right.
They were not crazy about some other things, but they ended up coming to work for myself because I think they believed in the plan, and I think they believed in my reputation with trying to make sure that I would take care of them and protect them, which I try to do as a general manager and put together the best hockey ops that we possibly could. And that's why you saw the Larry Plows and the
Mhm.
John Ferguson's and Daryl Plandowski and Ryan Janikowski and David Ludwigs of the world all joined forces because they felt there was a plan there and they felt we could get it accomplished. And I think there was a trust level that if they came work with me, they would have that, they could kind of see that plan come together. So and I believe we got a lot accomplished there, and which led us to moving to Utah. So I think it was a great fit.
Yeah, I mean, you're now 4 or 5 years out of those initial plans. Just how do you
Yeah.
feel if it's gone to course? Obviously, I don't think you were planning to move this team to Utah when you first got the job, but
Yeah.
in terms of the tangible rebuild, the way, prospects have developed, are
Yeah.
things going the way you kind of envisioned them?
I did, it's pretty much exactly as planned. There's some things like I thought we get a lot more picks than we ever dreamed of.
Mhm.
When I first took over, we didn't have any draft picks. The NHL had fined us for illegal things that had gone on before I had taken the job. So we had no picks, and there I was being an evaluator with no ability to bring talent into the organization. Through COVID and through taking on bad contracts, we were able to multiply that many times over to acquire a ton of picks. And by doing that, we brought talent into the organization. And it's nice to go into training camp now where we have new talent coming in every single year, and you can see the fruits of the labor. From the Logan Coolies to the Gunthers to the McBains and even the Sergachevs we've acquired through our draft picks. So it's coming together, and I wouldn't say there's always some adjustments you have to make in your plan, but the plan is pretty much going of what we planned and where we're supposed to be at in the rebuild is exactly where we are right now.
Wanted to talk a little bit more about Logan Cooley and Dylan
Yep.
Gunther. They're second and third in points on the team right now.
Yep.
Cooley's, I think, 5 behind Clayton Keller when we record this. Just what has it been like watching their leap and, consistency this season after, they've both said obviously for them last year was kind of up and down.
Yeah, well, it goes back to drafting the right player that you think you can have a chance to win a championship with. That's the first part. And then as you get the players in, you have to raise them right. No different. You have to raise your children right. You have to raise your players right and teach them the values you want and get them to play the right way in our culture. And I think our coach Andre Tournay has done a tremendous job with the players. And Dylan Gunther and Logan Cooley have responded. They play the game the right way, both sides of the puck, and they give everything they can, and they're always trying to constantly improve. And when you see them get better and better every single day, they come to the rink and they play the right way and leading this team the right way. You get chills. You get to the point where you can see it coming, and your team growing the right way, and that's the most important thing for us. And both those guys have a huge impact on helping this franchise achieve and getting to the next level.
You mentioned Sergachev, supplementing that youth talent within the organization with people you
Yeah.
brought in this summer. Ian Cole, Kevin Stenlin, certified winners. What do you think those types of players have done just to the culture in the locker room this
Yeah.
season to kind of, I don't know, calm things down and have that perspective that they've had in the league?
Well, I think one of the things that we tried to do in the summer was to get players that would come in and play for us and relatively be in the same age group as some of our players that are coming through of the Kellers and
Mhm.
even Coolies and that some players that could kind of grow with them. And one was Sergachev, and he was a huge impact player for us. He plays a ton of minutes. He's one of the top defensemen in the league, and he's playing for us. And every night he's our backbone. So for us to get a player like that is just huge. And you have to also remember that also ties into Ian Cole and Stenlins of the world, and the Bertuzas of the world that come in. They maybe not be here for long term, but there's a short term plan, and they're helping our organization grow because they're Stanley Cup winners. And that's also with Mata. So we have some really positive influences of people that have won, players that have won championships coming in, being around our young players every single day, the way that they prepare, how hard they play, playing right in the right moments. They're all helping us form our culture here. And when you're young, that's hugely important because if you don't, everybody's just all over the place, and sometimes young players can play just for points. So I think, as we talked about, is bringing them up the right way, helping our team's culture, and that's what those type of players do. They grow your culture.
A lot of those guys have also helped stabilize your blue line just with the injuries that your team has faced this year. Do you feel like you've been able to, fully assess what this team can be because you've had 3 to 4 defensemen out for basically the whole season, namely Sean
Yeah.
Durzi and John Marino?
It's been a huge frustration for our club because we want to get in there and achieve, and you want to be at your best. And your team naturally can go up and down, and there's a few injuries. We've had massive injuries, and that's been a frustrating thing for our club. Where you see you got 4 defensemen out and a goaltender. If we went back to the start of the year and I told you Connor Ingram's going to be missing, Durzi's going to be missing, Marino's going to be missing, Bortuzzo's out, and so is Lamoureux. Like that's a lot of injuries. What we've done is not use that as an excuse, and we've had guys that can come in and just really, play their hearts out. The Mattas of the world, the Kesselrings of the world, they've all helped us stay in the fight. Along with Vejmelka, he's been just one of the best goaltenders in the league, battling every single night and giving us a chance to win. So, our issue is that we're extremely competitive here. And we played the Stanley Cup champs last night, and we're not happy about losing. So, we're always pushing to become better, but there's also a reality factor where, hey, listen, we're a young team. They're in their window to win. We're not at this point. and we're having great games with them. But we're a competitive bunch, and we all want to get over that hump and one day, be the team to beat in the National Hockey League, be one of the top 10 best teams in the National Hockey League. And it's coming. It's just taking some time, and there's some growth. And last night we go in and play the champs, played a heck of a game, but we didn't come out on top. So I think those games actually leave some scars for us. And I think, they hurt inside. So I kind of like it in one sense, and, that it's helping our group grow. And we realize, hey, we're not that far off. It's a few
Yeah.
tweaks in here, and it's a little bit of growth here, and we're going to have a chance to compete with those teams.
Just speaking of the window to win, like you were saying, and trying to turn a corner,
Yeah.
when you have this amount of players out of the lineup, it seems like, they're close to return. But how do you view the trade deadline this year? Because obviously you guys are only a few games
Yep.
out of the second wild card spot, and I'm sure there's external pressure that it would be a cool story for the inaugural season, they make the playoffs. But for
Yeah.
you, I'm assuming it's less of a win now mindset, but is the mindset going into the trade deadline this March any different than it has been in the past?
Well, I think there'll be two trade deadlines for the NHL. One, is Four Nations. It's going to come up, and
Mhm.
there's a gap where GMs will go to work, right? So I think that's the first one, and then obviously in March, the start of March, there's another one that comes up. So I think teams will be working to improve their clubs. I'm not sure where we sit. I think our players will really determine whether we're buyers or sellers at that moment. For us, we're always going to try and improve our team long term. If that's something we can do at the deadline, we'll jump in. We'll be all on board. We got assets, and we can do the right thing and improve our team. I'm all for that. But short-term rentals right now, with not knowing whether we're going to get in or out, because it will be close. I've always predicted that it's probably going to be one point in or out for us if we can heal up here. That will be interesting. But who knows? We'll see at the trade deadline where we sit at that point. I think our players will dictate whether we're buyers or sellers.
When you say 1 point in or out, do you think the guys can appreciate that that is a next step in this evolution of the team, that they're playing meaningful games in the second half of the season, or is it,
Well,
they're not satisfied?
I think we're playing meaningful games before. Like,
Yeah,
we're
true.
like it's on. Like the other night in Calgary was, it's on. It's a make or break.
Mhm.
So I think that's important for this group. I think there's one thing in the rebuild nobody talks about is like, we're in the rebuild, the last 10 games of the season, we're just waxing teams. We have no pressure on us. We're high cycling it through our legs, scoring these incredible goals. But I think there's a difference when you have to win in the National Hockey League. And I think there's a difference in your team when you actually have pressure on your back on how you perform. And so I think that's something when you're playing meaningful games as early as we are in the season here and how important these games are, it's putting pressure on our players in the right way. And we're growing as a team to learning how to win and when we're supposed to win.
How important is that mental growth? Coach talks about it a lot. Even if you guys lost last night against the Panthers, he liked mentally where this group was
Yeah.
compared to how they played last year in terms of maturity too.
Last year we would have got waxed 10-1. We were just too young and not good enough. Now we're a little bit older and we're getting better. And I think that mindset that we have is important. We attack the game. If we make mistakes, we'll go back at it next day in practice or in video sessions, whatever it is. Our players are so good at improving. Our players are so good at accepting what we're not good at and fixing it and going back at it. So I really like that mindset that coach talks about. And it is a mindset. It's a mindset about win the day. We don't always have great days when you're going through the rebuild hill here. So you have to constantly win the moment, win the day, and just go at it. And I think our players do an incredible job at that.
Got it. And then last one for you here. Just what's your favorite part of the job? Obviously, you've been through a lot of challenging parts of the job. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's the one a lot of people envy at times, but in this new era of the team, just what's been the best part of your day to day?
Well, I think the best part, I mean, there's a lot of good parts about building behind the scenes, and acquiring players. I think that's great too, and just seeing the team come together. But winning is the ultimate thing that when you go in and execute the game plan and you see the young players that we have achieve and get over that hump and win those big games, that's the best feeling when you're driving home. There's about 15 minutes of my day with some music on the way home after a win. That is
What's the
probably the
song
most,
choice?
yeah, a song of choice, and Nobody's calling me. It's a peaceful moment. You can, and I love that, where we live in Utah, and it's just a peaceful drive home, and you get to enjoy that win, and then phone starts ringing the next morning. But that's probably the most satisfying. I really like where we are as an organization, with the people that we have on board, with the players, the fans. We're in a good situation here. It's just time and patience now, and watching the group grow.
I know I said last one, but a quick follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Was there a win this season, when you're driving home where you kind of felt like, okay, this is our ceiling, and where it felt like if we play like this every night, we're gonna win in this league?
Well, I really liked our game against Dallas the other night. I thought
Mhm.
truly that was our best. That's one of the top 10 teams in the National Hockey League. And I just thought we just played an incredible game. We didn't get the results that we wanted, but the way that we played against a really good team, and how smart we were and how skilled we were, and we dictated the play at times, that to me was a win. And I think teams play us right now and they say, they might win the game, but they're like, ooh, they're going to be good. I know they say that, when they leave, they're like, ooh, I don't want to play them next year. They're going to be a lot better. And I think that's the mentality of our team, is that we're constantly improving, we're constantly pushing, to get better. Where's the ceiling? You never like to put the ceiling on you. You got dreams, even as GM. You still want to see your team just overachieve from where they are, and that's what we try and do every day, is push the group and win the day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for doing this. I think this is going to be very informative for all the Utah Hockey Club fans, and it seems like everyone, midway through the season is already very bought into your vision for this group. So,
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, and good luck with your podcast.
thank you. Thank you so much again to Bill Armstrong for joining Inside the Club today. I hope everyone enjoyed that interview, and more to come. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, we're going to do a Q&A session at the end of each episode. We're going to keep it short today just because we had a longer interview, but just comment on Twitter, email me. I'll open a mailbag question on Twitter to collect questions, but whatever topics you guys want discussed on a weekly basis, I will get to them. So, our first question on Inside the Club is the club buying, selling, or standing pat on the trade market? I think everything they do should be with an eye towards 2025-26, not a playoff push this year. This is a great question. It's also something I asked Bill Armstrong, and I think I agree with kind of keeping an eye towards 2025-26, and also with what Bill said, where these players are kind of going to be the ones to determine what this team does at the trade deadline. If they are in a playoff position in the second wildcard spot and need a little extra reinforcement to really make a push, then maybe you make a move. If Dursey and Marino aren't fully healthy, or you're still dealing with issues in terms of injuries on the blue line, maybe you go for a right shot defenseman, because they're low on those right now. Michael Kessering is the only right shot defenseman in the lineup as of January 9th, until the other players come back. You also look at scoring in the playoffs. Utah has been a little bit inconsistent up and down, just with all four lines being able to score on a nightly basis. So maybe you'd want to get a middle six scoring winger. But at the same time, I don't know if this organization is in the spot to give up prospects, give up players just for a short-term rental at the end of the season. I don't think they'd ever take on, anyone with term or high salary cap or a big contract attached to them, because they don't need that. They're confident in the players in the room, and they want to see how internally the guys pan out. So I think it would have to be something like, Mata's contract is expiring, and Bill Armstrong signed a lot of the veterans to 1 to 2 year deals this summer. So I don't think they're looking for long-term solutions at the deadline. And also, if they're 4-6 points out at the trade deadline or leading up to it, I think they stand pat. It would be a big risk to get rid of, someone that you feel confident in that could work for you next season, or prospects that you don't know how they're going to pan out, just to see if you could make it to the playoffs. I think this team is in the position where they will be a playoff team in the next few seasons, so why rush it? But at the same time, I understand as fans, and definitely as players, they want to make it. So if you can pick up someone smart at the deadline, it could help. But I don't know if Utah will even know if it's a labeled buyer or a seller until this playoff picture becomes a little clearer. And I think after January, it definitely will. Like Bill said, leading into the Four Nations, when the league kind of has 2 weeks off too, a lot of general managers will get to work. So I think you'll have to look at where Utah is in the standings then, and what other teams are willing to do too. So great question. Thank you. Next, and our final question for today, what has been your most memorable moment of the first half of the season? It's hard to pick one. I feel like there's a few. I mean, I think opening night is the easy answer. That was so cool. Being a hockey fan my whole life and then getting to be a very, very small part of such a historic night in the league was really amazing. And we were there all throughout training camp when the players were arriving in Utah and being at the Olympic Oval. And you kind of saw this team go from 60 players to 23 at opening night, and seeing the evolution of that, and then seeing how they were wholly embraced by the community. It was a sellout crowd, one of the louder buildings I've been in all season. I think everyone there that night was like, okay, this is going to work in Utah. This is a really exciting thing for the team to have. So that's definitely up there. I also think the game against the Vancouver Canucks at Delta Center a few weeks ago, the 3-2 win in overtime. They were down 2-0 in the third. They came back and tied it, and then Sergachev wins in overtime. And I think that was just a turning corner for this team in terms of resilience and response, and kind of believing that they can compete in tough games, and that if there's 10 minutes left in a game and they're down by a goal or two, it doesn't mean they're out. So I think that was it proved to them that they can kind of hang with most teams in the league, and that carried over for a lot of December. And obviously Utah's in a bit of a slump right now, but I think those performances are obviously important to have on the bulletin board to be able to point back to say we could do it then, and we can get out of this and we can do it again. I'm rambling on this one. Obviously going back to New York was really cool too, because I'm from New York, and the Rangers opening night was against Utah, so that was pretty full circle. But I think overall it's just the day-to-day of it. I say this all the time, but this really is the dream job, and the fact that I wake up and I go to Delta Center or the Oval, with Cole, Brogan, Ryan, and all those guys who've become really good friends, and we get to cover an NHL team. I think it really never gets old. So obviously there's the big moments with the games and the headlines and the stories, but it really is just talking to the players and coaches and other beat reporters and just being in that environment every day that I think has been my favorite part. So that'll do it for Q&A this week, but next week I promise to answer a few more. But yeah, thank you everyone so much for tuning in to the first episode of Inside the Club. We're excited to keep this rolling and come back next Monday for a new episode. We have another guest. I won't reveal who it is yet, but I think you guys will enjoy it. It'll give an insight into one of Utah's upcoming games, as well as one of Utah's best young players and kind of his journey to where he is today. So stay tuned for that, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.